Welcome back to American Medieval. We have a treat for you this week, a crossover episode with our good friend Jason Herbert. This episode was recorded a few years ago, but we're excited to bring it back to you because, well, it's a fun conversation, and believe it or not, the Crusades are back in the news nowadays. Anyway, Jason Herbert is the host of Reckoning with Jason Herbert, a podcast about history, the outdoors, and movies. He's also the creator of Historians at the Movies Watch Party, one of the longest-running watch parties in the world. Look for it on social media. Jason's an expert on indigenous and environmental history in North America, and you can find his writings on jasonherbert.substack.com, where he has over 175,000 followers. But when he's not trying to conquer the social media world, he serves as a tribal liaison in Colorado for the United States Forest Service, which in no way endorses his work. You can find him all across media at Herbert History, all one word, or find Reckoning with Jason Herbert wherever you listen to podcasts. And the episode we're bringing you today is an oldie but a goodie. We talk about the 2003 Ridley Scott epic Kingdom of Heaven about the Crusades. Here, Jason, Matt, and friends of the podcast, John Wyatt Greenlee, the eel guy, Thomas Lecaque, the Yelly Holy War in America guy, and David Perry, the longtime friend and co-author of Matt guy. Together, they break down the movie, but mostly just break down having to watch the movie. As Jason says, it's 5 bearded men. Take that for better or for worse. I'll turn it over to Jason now. Enjoy.
All right, guys. I have assembled you, gentlemen, here, all with beards. I'm seeing there's like 5 bearded men. This is like the world's worst Avengers origin story to put together to talk about this movie, Ridley Scott's 2005 epic Kingdom of Heaven. So, gentlemen, I've got all 4 of you here on the screen. You've all been part of the legend that is the HATM podcast before. But for those people who are coming to this, absolutely, what is sure to be an absolute shit show today, let's have you guys introduce yourself. And to keep things calm, I'll just yell at you guys as I see you on the screen. So Thomas Lecaque, you're first up. Tell us how much you love England.
How much I love England so much. There is no country I love. I feel the need to bathe already. I'm Thomas Lecaque. I'm an associate professor of history at Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa. I am a French national, so that was a particularly painful question to ask me, Jason. Thank you. Thank you for setting this off on the right footing.
Oh yeah, it's going to be painful today. Matt Gabriele, where are you from today?
I am coming to you from the sunny Appalachian Mountains down here in Blacksburg, Virginia, where I'm a professor of medieval studies at Virginia Tech. And I'm also a co-author, I should say, with one of the other guys here of The Bright Ages, A New History.
And that other co-author is right next to you on my screen. So, David Perry, hit us up with who you are and what do you do?
I'm David Perry, and I have the privilege of being the only person among us who has resigned a full professorship with tenure in order to become staff at the University of Minnesota in the history department, where I am, I guess, the associate director of undergraduate studies to the history department of the University of Minnesota. But I also wrote a book with that guy, Matt, and I'd rather be fishing.
Oh, I think that makes probably all of us, but that's, John Wyatt Greenlee. I saw some stuff on eels today, but I don't want to ruin the surprise. So, John Wyatt, what would you say you do here?
I am the resident eel historian. Thank you very much, Jason. Yeah, I am the world's premier eel historian, actually. You can find me on Twitter. The other thing that I do primarily at this point is draw maps. I drew the map for Matt and David's book, actually. And so, surprise eel mapping, if you need a map, come find me. I'll draw one for you.
I have that book on my shelf. It's like over there in the Europe section, which as an American is the section with the dust on it.
Right.
I'm just like, it's there. Like Americanist. I'm so excited because I don't know anything today, which is gonna be a lot of fun. I spent all this time watch this movie we're talking about like 100 times because I think it's very pretty. But this is so far beyond my like knowledge base and so forth. Like I know there was a Crusades and I know there was a Europe, but that's about it. I know there's some Holy Land somewhere, but I tend to think when I think of Holy Land, I'm thinking like Whataburger. That's really what I'm going with. You know?
Center of the world, right? Yeah.
Something like that. Are you guys, you know, we've already done the Coke versus Pepsi thing. Where are you guys on burger stations right now? Like we get this Five Guys. What is it? What's the one? In-N-Out. where are you guys? Where are we on burgers?
I'm 50 and I can't digest them anymore. Thanks for bringing it up, young man.
I'm 5 years younger than you. Thank you so much for like allowing me to know what's ahead of my short life.
It's gonna get worse, and then it's gonna get bad.
It's gonna turn to applesauce. Best applesauce.
I have never had a Whataburger, but I'm a staunch Five Guys fan. And I believe In-N-Out is vastly overrated.
Tom, what do you got?
I mean, like where I am, I love Five Guys. I really enjoy Culver's.
Oh,
I've only had In-N-Out once, and I did not get the appeal.
So Five Guys is pretty much all we've got here in Ithaca where I live. I actually really like Steak and Shake.
Actually, I like their chili. Steak Shake's solid. I've said for years, like if Culver's would just switch to Coca-Cola, and then they did. And did you know the very first Culver's to switch to Coca-Cola was in my hometown of Murray, Kentucky? I shit you not. It was like a sign. It was a lot like David Thewlis in this film, who may or may not have been the Archangel. Like I felt like
That's a good transition, Jason. That was very impressive.
I am going to segue the fuck out of this podcast today. Like, you just give me a second, and we're just going to go with this. Also, goodbye to the 30% of the viewers who were like, "Oh, there's cursing on this podcast." So now that that's out of the way, all right, guys, we're talking about Kingdom of Heaven. This comes out in 2005. It's the third and really kind of like this. Like, there's this whole series of like sword and sandal movies that come out. We've got obviously Gladiator, we've got Troy. What else is coming out at this point in time? We've got Kingdom of Heaven. Obviously, there's a few of them that are coming out at this point in time. And then this thing hits, and we've been arguing about it for the better part of 2 decades since then. So before we jump into these movies to talk about like what it does right, what it does wrong, so forth, we know the basic plot here. Could somebody want to jump in here and like talk about like basically who's at stake here? Like what are we talking about? Movie starts in France. I'm going to go with you, Thomas. Like, what are we doing?
That's an excellent question. What are we doing? Where the hell in France
Okay.
are they? You're in mountains? Are you in the Auvergne? Are you in the Pyrenees? No, you're in Morocco, which doesn't look anything like the mountainous regions of France. I don't know what to say about it. It's really pretty and makes no goddamn sense. You have a blacksmith who has also been a knight and also a combat engineer.
Prior to his blacksmithingness.
And a silversmith.
And a silversmith all at the same time when he's like, 30?
No, he's younger than that, like early 20s. He's like early
20s.
20s.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
or like 2,000 years old. It's Legolas. So it's
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
The movie makes so much more sense if you just assume he's Legolas.
Honestly, it does, in fact,
Mhm.
make much more sense. The scene where the German gets shot with infinite arrows but keeps killing, he's just Boromir.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
that's fair.
obviously.
Oh, I love that dude.
Oh my God.
All right, so let me. I'm the old man here. Let me try to get us there.
Get us in so we can get our burgers in tonight.
It's set in the late 12th century.
Right.
Jerusalem was conquered in 1099. All 4 of us here have real doubts about whether to call anything crusades at all, whether there were crusades. For that matter, when you said there was a Europe, we're not entirely sure about that either, because that's what we do for a living. But there was definitely a conquest of Jerusalem in 1099, and new political entities formed along the east coast of the Mediterranean with connections back to various political entities in the West, and a more or less constant flow of people, pilgrims, merchants, families, fighters, sometimes in large armies, but more often in smaller dribs and drabs, going to the east and staying for a long time or for a very short line, going to pilgrimage sites and fighting, not pilgrimaging, trading. There's a 90-year continuum from 1099 into the 1180s of lots of movement back and forth that has real interesting consequences for culture, for politics, for religion, for all the things that we study, as well as for military political history. When we hit this moment, there's new threats in the form of Saladin or Salahadin, who has unified a larger territory of that region, and he's pushing back at these states on the Eastern Mediterranean. And along comes Liam Neeson back to somewhere in France to pick up his bastard son and bring him back to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, make him his heir, and then something is going to happen. But we don't know what that is because instead they get ambushed and everybody, spoiler alert, all these really interesting characters you get introduced to in the first 35 minutes of the film get killed. Really interesting characters, one after another, and they all just get slaughtered. They're gone. By the time you reach the Holy Land, there's one of these interesting characters left, and you barely see him for the rest of the film anyway. So those are the stakes and the premise.
The least interesting of the characters survive.
Yeah, the hospitaler. Like, he's not even interesting, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting, because we're going to get into this film, and like I think it's any doubt. Like, we all have some real reservations on this movie, and we're going to talk about its weaknesses, I guess. But it's like the best part of the film seems like it happens in France, right? It's like that's the really interesting sub stories here, where you've got Liam Neeson coming back. He's going to find his son. The son's got, kind of, I'm not really, I have committed murder. So, like, all right. So let me ask you this before we start jumping into the events of the film itself. You talked a little bit about Saladin. Knights Crusaders are here. The Knights Templar are in this film. They show up in pop culture all the time. Can we just talk real briefly, just so we know, who the hell are these guys?
Losers.
And are they exclusively men? Like, is there a female dimension to Knights Templar, or is it just men? What's going on with these guys?
Matt, I'm looking at you because I know you just did a History Channel documentary appearance on the Templars. So I think you should tell us all the truth.
I think you're down, dude. Yeah.
The truth is, I mean, they're hiding the Holy Grail.
Again?
And they were somehow involved in Mary Magdalene's marriage to Jesus and stuff like that. So the Knights Templar, I mean, very, very briefly, yeah, like they have been a staple of conspiracy theories, as I'm sure everybody here, of course, knows, and then most of the readers knows as well, since forever. And I'll take this moment to plug the new show that's on Peacock TV, Mrs. Davis, which involves the Templars as well. And it's such a good show. Makes no sense at all, but it's just a delightful show, which involves the Templars and a Vatican conspiracy and an AI that wants to rule the world, but maybe not. Anyway, it's great. But the actual historical Templars, or the Knights of the Temple, were this kind of fusion of two different traditions, which found their kind of genesis, or at least their kind of fullest expression, in the late 11th century with this thing we call the First Crusade, which is this religious devotion, which we traditionally, before that time, had been associated almost entirely with monasteries, but then transforming that type of devotion to a lay audience, beginning earlier in the 11th century, but really reaching its fullest expression with the quote-unquote pilgrimage to Jerusalem, this armed pilgrimage that retakes Jerusalem. But then, of course, the arms bearing, that's what the nobility of the 11th century did, which is that was their primary job, was to just take swords and hack things up, steal land from other people, kill each other, threaten the local, churches into giving them what they want, et cetera, et cetera. So in the aftermath of the conquest of Jerusalem in the late 11th century, some of the people who stayed, as the story goes, some of the people who stayed in the Holy Land in and around Jerusalem decided to kind of formalize, or at least to try to formalize, what they had been doing, devoting themselves, taking the vows, the traditional monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but then continuing to do, again, what they as noblemen did, which was fight and kill people, primarily Muslims in this particular context. They formed a sworn association of some type. The sources are a little bit fuzzy about exactly kind of when this happened and how this came about. But what we do know is very early on, it received the enthusiastic backing of the King of Jerusalem, the Christian King of Jerusalem at the time, and it gave them space on the Temple Mount in one of the temples in which they took their name, the Knights of the Temple, or the Knights Templar. Very shortly after that, they went on a recruiting trip back to Europe, and they convinced Bernard of Clairvaux, kind of one of the kind of superstars, the most popular, most influential figures of the early 12th century, who wrote a treatise in praise of the new knighthood, and they received formal recognition from the papacy shortly after that. And then they exploded in popularity for the next century and a half, until, well, more than about 2 centuries, until they were formally suppressed in the early 14th century. But in that interim period, you had all sorts of different communities, both knights who would pledge their service to be laymen, but also clerics who would be attached to the Templars, lay brothers who would just be kind of formal servants, or various sergeants and things like that attached to the military functions. They set up commanderies all over Europe and all throughout the Holy Land, built castles for the defense of Christian territories there. So one of the things that the movie actually does right in some ways is get at how important they were in both the mental and political and cultural lives of the Middle East in this particular period, especially as it relates to the defense of the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem.
I'm kind of wondering, like, what are these competing visions? We talk about the Holy Land and obviously this huge conflict around Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. What are the competing visions here? You've got, say, the Christian empires, the Christian peoples over here to the base out of Europe and so forth. What about Saladin and the folks who are with him? These are Saracens? Who is Saladin representing? Who are these guys? and the folks with him?
Sure. I mean, talking as historians, we have to abandon sort of this idea of a hegemonic Christian world, a
Sure.
hegemonic Muslim world. And Saracen is not a word that we should use as defining any people that ever existed. It is a word we can use to talk about how some medieval Christians referred to, understood their world.
Okay.
But it's not a real word that has sort of defines a people, right? The Islamic world at the time included lots of peoples of lots of different kinds of Islam and lots of non-Muslims. There's actually a really important moment right at this when this movie happens, in which the Druze population, Druze are another religious group within there, they align with Saladin in part because they had been raided by the Christian rulers of Jerusalem. So they're right. Saladin was a Kurd. There are Kurds, there are Arabs, there are Turks, and many other peoples. So it's a complicated world. And one of the reasons that Jerusalem was conquered successfully in 1099 is that it was a politically fractious world with lots and lots of factions fighting each other all the time. So this new army that was in the late 11th century was able to come in and do a lot of damage. What Saladin succeeds in doing on the basis of the work of his predecessors as well is uniting a larger group of this complicated, really interesting sort of polyvalent society with, again, just within the Muslims, the different kinds of Muslims, and then within the Arabs, Kurds, and Turks. But then it's a really interesting, complicated society that's sort of in this fascinating point that connects different parts of the world. He brings them together into this new dynasty and manages to wield their political power effectively, but always tenuously. I mean, he always has a much bigger army than his enemies, but anytime you deploy your army, you're taking a lot of risks. They do this a little bit in the movie where they try to kind of hint at different factions within Saladin's empire, but only in the vaguest possible way, which is fine. I mean, that's a whole separate movie. And in fact, a movie that's been made in various ways and within the Arab, sort of the history of Arab cinema in particular. But he has this big empire, but it's not an empire that has a long tradition of unity under his dynasty that sort of holds them together. It is newly made and very complicated, and he has a lot of internal politics to deal with before he can ever sort of get an army in the field.
I want to ask you guys about Saladin himself, and forgive me for those of you who are coming to this. I'm just going to say Saladin as well. He was a guy who I came to understand through pop culture. I can't recall the first time I ever actually read about him. And as I was kind of doing some very light background reading on this film, I had read somewhere that historiographically he had kind of shifted to the background for a while and had only kind of recently. Scholars had only kind of piqued their interest in him recently. What's the deal on this guy? Do you guys have thoughts on Saladin and his historical importance here? Like, why should we know Saladin? Like, what's the big deal? Thomas, you're smiling.
I mean, he's a big figure, but he makes such a huge splash in European sources where he makes this kind of perfect villain. You have to have your perfect enemy so that, King Richard the Lionheart gets to be the great crusader despite not succeeding in his goal. So Saladin has to have this kind of be put on a pedestal in European sources to be an effective foil to make your king great. Why do we not retake Jerusalem? It's because Saladin, if only he were Christian. The kind of rhetoric on the First Crusade is used about the Turks. He is a really important and really interesting figure on his own. It's the kind of culmination of the Zengid dream of using the theoretical threat of the Crusader states to unite a large number of city-states and polities within the kind of slowly drifting apart Abbasid Caliphate into a single strong emirate. And Saladin successfully pulls off the unification of Egypt, conquered from the Fatimids, with the major Syrian city-states to build this kind of united front against the Crusaders. But it's this use of we have to reclaim Jerusalem as a rhetorical ploy of why I need to control all of these military settlements, why I'm going to invade these independent polities and conquer them and bring them into this broader political sphere to be able to then turn my attention on the Crusader states. That requires some nuance and reflection on kind of the political mess that is the Islamicate throughout the kind of 12th century that, I don't know, drifts in and out of what people are focusing on at a given time.
But there's also a 19th century tradition of turning Saladin into the Muslim version of the perfect chivalric knight.
He does sort of drift off into the background for a while. And then as David was saying, in the 19th century, he gets picked up again in European historiographic tradition, especially, as this sort of exemplar of chivalric tradition, partly because they're also looking to Richard the Lionheart for that too. So like you have to have the sort of two sides of the same coin, right? If Richard is such an amazing example of knighthood, right? How does he get defeated? by the sort of the other side of the coin, right? By somebody who is himself as exemplary. And so he gets picked up for that as well, and really lionized in a way that he hadn't been before the mid to late 19th century.
And it's not just scholarship. Sir Walter Scott, the guy who wrote Ivanhoe, right? He has a very famous crusade story called The Talisman, in which Saladin shows up. I mean, I was thinking about The Talisman as I was rewatching this movie in preparation for the podcast, because in some ways Saladin is not a major character in this movie. He's just the guy who's sort of on the edges the whole time to keep things moving around. I would like a version of this movie in which there's a lot of Saladin. I think he's really interesting, but I think he may have 10 to 15 minutes of screen time. I didn't count, in a 3+ hour movie.
This movie is actually 67 hours long.
Okay, I thought it might be. But like, if he's the main foil, he's not.
No.
If he was the main foil to Balian, then you would expect, more of a Darth Vader-like presence, right? A lot of screen time. He's kind of a bit role in a lot of ways in terms of this movie, and that fits some of the, not the historiographical tradition, but the literary tradition, in which, in many ways, I see Kingdom of Heaven as existing within a literary tradition of Crusade fantasy, rather than the historiographical tradition of what 19th century scholars thought about the Crusades, and then early 20th century scholars, or what we as 21st century scholars whose work includes the Crusades. I mean, we belong to historiographical tradition, but there's this literary one as well. And I don't think that's what Ridley Scott wanted to do. I think that he bought into the literary tradition and tried to portray it as history. And he's not the first fiction writer to do so.
He's there to do the Runciman, right?
Yeah,
He's there to give you the Runciman. They're like, oh, the Crusader states are really just part of this interesting polyglot Middle East. And that's how is that when you have Baldwin the Fourth meeting him, they chat, they're sharing physicians, they can speak in Arabic. This is how you have the courtesy, you have the ice, and then you have, these British Europeans who do British European stuff. That's what he's there for.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think in that sense, too, it is part of a historiographical tradition that people who study the Crusades have to confront, because the Runcimanian tradition, right, was dominant for a long time in the middle of the 20th century, especially, what is that famous last line about Runciman, about the Holy War being an affront against God or something like that? Or the Crusades were one big act of intolerance, which is a sin against, the Holy Ghost or something like that. He was making a theological point, Runciman was, but that's a historiographical point as well, which I think that Kingdom of Heaven, by playing off these 19th century fantasy tropes, is actually participating in some ways. The ultimate message of the movie to me is religion is bad. All religion is bad, right? I mean, the good guys are Baldwin, the poor leper king, Sibylla, who's kind of trapped within this kind of weird marriage, Balian, who becomes disillusioned and therefore enlightened, and then Saladin, who doesn't believe any of this shit, and he's just he's just kind of along for the ride because he's doing the thing he wants to do. I mean, we still see that kind of in some historiography. It's still scholarship, to this day, is that this is all political maneuverings, and the religion stuff is just a big smokescreen for what's really going on.
All right, guys. Well, we've laid out now, I guess, maybe the actors or who's playing along here in this film. And before we start chopping away at this, because I know you guys are just chomping at the bit on this thing, make your case for this film. What does this film do right? When you're looking back at this film, what do you like about it? What's going on in this movie? What does this film really, when you look at it, say, okay, this movie's problematic, what do I like about it? We're looking back and say, hey, there's a reason why you should watch that, and here's why. What's your case here? Thomas, what do you got?
It is an excellent time capsule of the badly educated but well-intentioned critiques of the Iraq War. And that's about the only nice thing I can say about it. I think it's...
Holy shit, you went meta. First question. All right.
I mean, I don't have something else nice to say. Oh, also, Eva Green's in it. Eva Green's in the film. She's on screen. Yes.
We're good on that. Yeah.
There are a lot of very pretty people in that.
We're all people in the Middle Ages, in this era, pretty. A question for another
Just
podcast.
like in California, yes. They were all that pretty. They had perfect teeth, just like California.
No, hold on. They don't all have pretty teeth, because the blacksmith's assistant at the beginning of the film has bad teeth.
Well caught.
All right. John Wyatt, you chimed in here. What do you like about this movie? What are they getting right here?
Well, those are really different questions. So it is expanding on from the people outward. It's a really gorgeous movie. It's beautifully shot. It's great. It would be really nice, background scenery. There are places where I think they do a nice job of showing sort of, and we talked about this at the last podcast was on with you with the 13th Warrior, but there are places in the movie where they do a nice job of showing some of the intermixing of religious cultures. Places like Messina, which is problematic for its own reasons, but like places like Messina where you see Christians and Jews and Muslims all sort of working around each other and living around each other. And I like that because I like that it gets away from sort of a dynamic of polar opposites where you've got Jews and Christians and Muslims and they're like there's no interaction between them. So I think it gets that right in parts and it's pretty.
Dr. Gabriele?
I teach with this every time I teach my Age of the Crusades course. I use this film, and part of it is because it is a meta commentary, and I use it at the end to talk about the politics of studying the Crusades after 9/11 because it's a great document to use to talk about that. But I think it actually there's some kind of set pieces in it which I think are really useful to kind of demonstrate some themes which I think are important when we talk about the Mediterranean in the 12th and 13th century. And one of them is John Wyatt just mentioned is that scene in Messina when Balian is about to go off to the east, and not just kind of the mixing, but also the constant flow of people. The movement of people across the Mediterranean world, in which we're kind of between crusades, right? In which this we're not, we're past the Second Crusade, we're not quite to what we call the Third Crusade yet, but there's a huge mass of people who are going east and coming from the east all the time. And I think that captures, again, it breaks down some of the stereotypes oftentimes, especially students have, and people who don't know a whole lot about the Middle Ages, the European Middle Ages, is they think about Europe as kind of a closed off space. It's not. People just kind of moved back and forth. And it wasn't just that they were going from Messina, directly to Acre or Jerusalem or something like that. I mean, they were going, across North Africa. The other thing I'll highlight, and I think there's a couple other things I could talk about too, is I like how they portray Sibylla. Not just, the fact that she's Eva Green, which is great. She's a wonderful actress. But the role that queens, especially women, can play as the central to medieval society, in which she is orchestrating and maneuvering and she's subjugated in certain ways, but she has a certain amount of power in which she can operate. And it gets at, Sibylla was such a much more interesting, complicated figure than is portrayed in the film itself, in which she actually seems to have really been in love with Guy de Lusignan, who was actually a pretty competent ruler who was kind of forced into certain situations. He's not at all kind of the caricaturist bad guy that he's portrayed as, and so that's a disservice. But again, like Sibylla being at the center of this in a lot of ways, and her freedom to operate and to maneuver and do kind of, I think that's really interesting because we tend to talk about kind of, dudes with swords. And this tries at least a little bit to get away from that as she's negotiating that. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll give it to David, is to the role of children in it as well, is the importance of her children and the care that she evinces. She very clearly loves her son. And we hear this all the time as medievalists, that people in the Middle Ages didn't care about their kids. They were just disposable, had them but that's absolutely not the case and is clearly demonstrated there as well.
I want to come back to talk about her son because this is the first time I've watched the director's cut.
Really?
And her son is not in the original movie.
Yeah.
And it is is it a different movie with her son in it. So I'd like to circle back on that one. When this movie came out, it came out in May of 2005, and I was teaching at St. Olaf College, just down the road from the Twin Cities, and I was teaching a class on the history of the Crusades. And so I said to them, hey, we're going to get a van, and for your final exam, we're going to go watch this movie, and then we're going to come back, and you're going to write all the things that are good about it. Just like you asked us, all the things that are historically true about it. We're not going to write all the things that aren't historically true about it. I will talk about that. But I want you to find things in it that you recognize. It was a great exam question. It worked really well. They wrote really good stuff. I remember something like, for example, I think you can do that with any historical movie, right? Because critique is sort of the easy part. But what's interesting is the other thing is particularly for undergraduates. There's a moment in which one of the characters more or less quotes Fulcher, I think it's Fulcher of Chartres, a really important text on the early kingdom of Jerusalem, in which he talks about essentially the class mobility of people who did one thing in Europe now can do something else in here. It's a really nicely written piece of rhetoric by Fulcher of Chartres, and it is misquoted, I think, on purpose, because my understanding of Ridley Scott's research for this is that whoever else helped him write, they read sources in English. So I know everything that he read because we teach them, right? We know exactly what the English language sources are for this period. And there are a couple of moments where they pop up in the dialogue, and I like that. It's like, hey, it's like that meme where, your point, like, hey, I see that. That's really great. I like hearing Folker of Shark put in the mouth of a character. And there's a couple of moments like that. I think there could be a lot more of that. And this is sort of what Matt, I know we're talking about positives. Anyway, and my students noticed that and they liked that, and that was good. I never mind when a historical movie leaves the history to tell a better story. I just think that this movie leaves the history to make a point about multicultural, anti-religious tolerance in ways that tells a much worse story. There are better stories to be told that would be truer, but that would not serve an anti-Iraq war position, an anti-fanaticism position, because that's not what the history does. And so I understand the choices he made, but every time I watch this movie, including in the last 24 hours, I think about what actually happened and things that either are distorted within the movie or just left out. And I feel really disappointed. I want to see, I'll give one example and then I'll pass it on. The Battle of Hattin is one of the most important battles in this entire history. And it essentially happens in this movie. You see the army marching and getting thirsty, and then you see their bodies across the field. And this is because the big fight in which they want to spend $100 million is the siege of Jerusalem at the end, which is boring. The Battle of Hattin, we have 4 or 5 different sources from different positions. The politics on each side are really interesting. The military strategy of how Saladin's forces cut the Crusaders off from water and then lit fires to make them more and more thirsty overnight. Several heroic charges, one of which helps one of the main characters, Jeremy Irons, who doesn't actually go to the battle in this movie. Jeremy Irons escapes through a heroic charge, and Guy de Lusignan leads multiple desperate heroic charges down the hill until he eventually is defeated. I mean, this is, give me $100 million and let me just film the Battle of Hattin. And I was so excited. I remember being so excited going into this movie because I'd seen Gladiator. I knew they had the budget, and it's just a cut scene, and then there's the bodies. And I'm just still disappointed in that. They could have done so much. And there's a lot of moments like that in this film.
Wow.
I have one other nice thing before we go into critiquing.
Let's go and get it out of the way.
I love the fact that at the beginning in this kind of, again, all of these super interesting characters that make it 15 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
You have a black character who's riding around in South Central France, and like, it's just not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. The kids are hanging out with him, but the kids are hanging out with all the others. It is a nice moment of just like, oh, this is actually normal. And then everyone just moves on. You don't have to do much with it because like there is movement. And I really, rewatching it this time, that was a very nice moment of the movie. That's just, he's there, he's with them, he's a crusader, it happens, then he dies like everyone else, and we all move on because it's just a normal day in, pseudo-medieval Europe where everyone gets murdered.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, and this kind of comes back to even like in my own work, when I'm talking about, say, the Americas, indigenous history, and things like that, I'm so cautious about saying the French, and creating this idea of this one uniform people. And, we've talked about this, the group of us on several different occasions, of this incredibly diverse space that was the era, that was the region, and it's, for some reason, it seems like it's been caught up in these ideas, like, these are the Crusaders, this is the Holy Land, this is the Dark Ages, if you will, and all these things. I'm getting smiles for all you guys, because and I think you know where I'm going. So yeah, the diversity here is important. These stories are important to, because they start to disrupt a lot of the contemporary notions we have about our own past and who we are. That said, let's talk about this movie and talk about what you guys, let's just go. Tee off, guys. Kingdom of Heaven, go. I guess that's where I'm going to go. What are your thoughts on this movie? Where do you go?
My favorite part
All right.
of this movie. You're ready.
For those of you not watching, Matt just shook out his entire body and is ready to exhale.
So my favorite part is when Balian, who is the son of a blacksmith, hasn't known that he's of noble blood, arrives in the east after he's been shipwrecked. He kind of gets feted. He realizes his noble station. And then he gets sent out to his castle, which is kind of on the outskirts, like outside of Jerusalem. And this blacksmith from France, discovers irrigation. It explains that you need water to grow plants. And so,
and you could dig for it. It might be in the ground, Matt.
Have you guys thought about a well?
Yes, he's talking to a culture with thousands upon thousands of years of agriculture in this area. And in this movie, for some fucking reason, Legolas has to explain how water works.
Matt, have you not been to all of the beautiful wet field irrigated sites in France?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I have been to all of them. I mean, there might be one. I don't know. There might be one. I'm not an expert, but
Yeah.
it's certainly not a predominant mode of French agriculture then or now.
None of the places with mountains in France have this.
That's right. Yeah.
No, and you know what's interesting to me about that scene, right? It's not just the sort of indigenous people who've been living there forever don't have that knowledge. It's also 100 years of Europeans living there and having settled there who also somehow didn't think about that. Like, it's all of them. They're all bad at this, but not him. Not him. He's got this figured out because he's all about competence porn. Like, there isn't anything he can't do.
Right.
Well, you were kind of getting on that earlier, right? When you said like he's somehow a blacksmith and a silversmith and a military engineer and
a knight.
And a knight.
And he picks up swordplay really fast.
Absolutely.
And also manages to really what should be a really difficult transition from being like a nobody blacksmith in the mountains in nowhere, France, to like talking to the King of Jerusalem. Like, it's nothing. There's just like
about how he should build his castles better because he's also an expert in robust military fortifications.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, not just that, but the idea of like climbing social hierarchy, right? The how do you address if you're a blacksmith? How do you talk to a king?
Yeah, there is no sense in this movie ever of him being like, "What the fuck am I doing here, guys?" Like, and there really ought to be.
I mean, like it's one of the few moments that shitty Guy de Lusignan, who is absolutely nothing like historic Guy de Lusignan, is right. Like, who are you? Why are you here? I don't know. It's
Can we talk about Martin Sakis as like this twirling guy? You know?
I just want to add, like, there's actually, again, an interesting story. Balian of Ibelline rises to the status because he's the son of a minor knight, right? They are minor nobility. And because of the tumult and change in the nature of power in these Latin kingdoms, his family is able to climb. From knight to like senior knight to serious leader, that's a big jump. You know, and it happened, and it's real. Blacksmith, bastard son blacksmith to senior leader does not happen. It's fantasy. I'm going to say this like 47 more times in the next 23 minutes, but like the actual history is more interesting. It's a better story. And a story Ridley Scott knows how to tell. I mean, Gladiator, right? Like, it's fictionalized, but at least there's a little bit more grounded in a historical moment. I don't know. That's a different podcast, and we'll let our classicists yell about that. But I would love a good movie with Balian of Ibelline. He's really interesting. And we get the fantasy version rather than the historical fantasy version. And it's just a missed opportunity.
I had that thought too, that it would have been a much more interesting movie, like even accepting the premise of like blacksmith to the dude who surrendered Jerusalem. It would have been a much more interesting movie if we'd seen the progression of his like not knowing what he was doing, the real fish out of water thing, right? Where he's like, like, I don't know how to use a sword, but I'm going to hit you with a hammer. Like, that would have been more interesting. And then sort of like watching him sort of stumble into, without coming to it from like a place of just competence, sort of stumble into learning.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's no stakes in his climb to power. It's just like, it's sort of a greased skid in front of him. He doesn't have to work for it.
Well, you could also have done it competence porn if you'd just been like, he's a blacksmith surrounded by feckless nobles and he just does blacksmith shit the entire time.
Sure.
Right. It's decently like, oh, well, I don't know, man. I shipwrecked here. I'm going to put on silk and I'm a knight now. And like, oh, now I'm a prince. And now, here I am doing king shit.
Yeah.
Like, if it just been like, what are you assholes doing? Why don't we just have spears? Right. Like, even if you want to do the irrigation thing, it's just like, I don't know. Like, did the lords never think to like give you supplies? This is stupid. You've been wanting to build wells all along. All right, I'll build a well with you. Like, you could have just done like, what if you took out the status and just had like normal people doing normal people shit? But they want both of them simultaneously. And so it feels weird the whole time.
It also points to the problem that I'm not sure Orlando Bloom can carry a movie like this as an actor. And again, I can't think of this movie without thinking of Russell Crowe in Gladiator, who can carry a movie like that as an actor. At least I think he can at the time, right? He can carry a movie, whereas Orlando Bloom doesn't have the weight, like physically the weight or but he's also not given anything to do. He looks stoic and mad for the first hour, and he looks stoic and resolved for the second hour, and he looks stoic and bloody for he's not given, there's no writing for him. There's no character. He and Bald and the Leper King are supposed to be friends. They have a 2-minute conversation, right? And then later, my friend, he and Sabella end up, having sex, but there's no heat. There's no play. Like, she sees him once, then she shows up at his castle. Oh, look, you built a well. Let's go to bed. Like these are failures of writing. These are not failures of history. These are not failures of research. This is just, again, Ridley Scott has this idea of what he wants to do. I have 75 ideas of what he wants to do, and none of them are just tell a good story that does the things that storytelling does, where you have a character who progresses, you have heat between, people, and then eventually they fuck. You have politics and different agendas. You have all of this can be done. Some of it has to be done in a 7-year miniseries, right? But it's been done in other movies and other shows, and it just doesn't. It never happens, right?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I don't think he can carry it. I think he has this sort of other aspect, sort of othering aspect, which is great when he's an elf, right? And sort of apart from the world. But he carries that into all of his other roles too, and it just doesn't work. Like, he doesn't have the acting to carry it, and he's simply not physically believable as a blacksmith. He just isn't.
Right.
If you had made him the son of a minor lord and you'd done that like a low nobility to high nobility thing, but you've done it like Pirates of the Caribbean, where he's just like sweet and earnest and keeps like stumbling upwards by being kind of sweet and earnest, you could have pulled that off.
Yeah.
Right. If you wanted the rugged blacksmith doing stuff, like, you want a Tom Hardy. You want someone who is going to like make some choices that are bad for their health and are going to really commit to this role. I don't know.
They would eat hamburgers.
Yeah.
Do you know who was up? Who else was up for this role?
No.
I'm going to throw a name at you. Do you guys watch ER back in the day?
Yeah.
The guy who succeeded Clooney as like the resident handsome guy is Gordon Visnich. I forget how to pronounce his last name. He was up for the role. But again, it felt like this movie was like kind of workshopped. It's like you've got handsome, young Orlando Bloom, fresh hot off of Lord of the Rings. Like, let's throw him into this thing. And he doesn't have the weight. And you're talking about, you don't buy him as the son of a blacksmith. I don't buy him as the son of Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson, I'm serious.
Yeah, that's fair.
Liam Neeson is a man's man. In a lot of ways, this dude is a 65-year-old action star, and I would not mess. The man fights bears, and wolves, and all of Europe when they steal his daughter. Like, I just can't see.
Not for nothing. One of the most unbelievable parts of this movie is that Liam Neeson travels all the way back to France to find his son, has a 2-minute conversation with him where the boy's like, I don't think I want to go with you. And he's like, all right, cool. Peace. I'm out. I give up.
Yeah. Liam Neeson hits him over the head, throws it.
You're coming with me, boy.
Yes, exactly. Liam Neeson does not take no for an answer from his bastard blacksmith son in that instance. He just drags him off to the Holy Land with him. And that's that.
Dwelling on that for a minute, that's true, and it's very funny, and it would be a great scene actually. But I mean, that's actually more historically accurate, right? I mean, like if Liam Neeson as the Lord, as this kid who's his bastard son, like even if he's an adult, like, he doesn't actually have a choice about what he wants to do. If there's if Liam Neeson's character, like the father, who's the actual Lord of that area, like wanted him to go, like, the fucker's going. Like, I mean, that's not like a choice. He doesn't have that kind of free will. But I know they need to set up that tension about him kind of coming with him and stuff like that. But like, they could have made that a much more interesting kind of, and then that sets up a real tension about, like, Balian not wanting to be there necessarily, right? Like, but he's being kind of dragged along, and then like he's been kind of swept along by events. And this goes back again to David's point, which is just like, the actual history is more interesting than the story that they decided to tell.
So I had a question for the three of y'all, not you, Jason.
Thanks.
So, no, it's okay. But for them, because they work more directly on the Crusades than I do. Okay. Why the fuck are they going to Messina? Like, that's wicked out of the way, man. Like, from wherever they are in France, why are they not going to Venice?
Would you not traditionally go to Venice? Yeah.
Or Venice or Bari? If you didn't want to pay to sail from Venice, then you'd walk your way down to Bari. But like, Messina's on the other side of Italy. It's like getting there by foot is a pain, man. Like, there aren't good roads.
Yeah. This is something I definitely knew once. Because I'm a Venetianist, there was a moment in my life in which I had kind of the 12th century maritime routes to the Eastern Mediterranean pretty solidly in my head. And that moment has long since passed. On the other hand, I've drunk a lot more bourbon since then, so I have no complaints.
It's a good trade-off.
And I could look it up. Right? Like this, there are people who have spent their entire careers studying the logistics of movement, both specifically in sort of Crusade scholarship, but also more broadly, like John Pryor, who is like, if it's medieval and it floats, he knows everything about it. That was what someone introduced him as, and he does. It's amazing. Like he He knows everything about every boat from 1,000 to 1,400 in the Mediterranean. It's quite astounding. So there's definitely transshipment out of Sicily, but I feel like it happens because, if I recall correctly, the Third Crusade goes from England to Lisbon, Lisbon to Sicily. There's all that Sicilian crap that happens, Sicily to Cyprus, all the Cypriot stuff that happens, and then onto the mainland with Richard and Philip, right? So I think Richard and Philip maybe hook up in Sicily. I don't think it was Messina, but it could have been Messina for sure.
I think it's Messina.
And yeah, I mean, so I felt like it was just someone said, "Oh, the Third Crusade shipped from Messina. We'll just set them there." Does that mean? I'm sure there was lots of people going from Messina to Jerusalem, to Latin Kingdom, but not from France. You go to an Adriatic port, or you go to a Ligurian port, Genoa or Venice, basically, right? Or Marseille.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're taking ship from Marseille or Genoa, like, okay, then that makes some sense. You're going sort of right through there. But that's not what the directions, the instructions were like, you travel south till you find people that speak Italian, and then you keep going south until they're not doing it anymore. Like, it's on foot, man. Anyway, it bothered me as a guy who thinks about geography a lot.
This Guy Sucked is a history podcast for haters by haters. Join historian Dr. Claire Albin and a new expert every week to pull back the scholarly curtain on some of the world's biggest bummers. No dead person's safe. From Charlemagne to Carl Schmitt, every episode gives listeners all the ammo they need to win dinner table arguments over why history's main characters were actually kind of the worst. New episodes every Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Can we stay in Messina for a quick second?
Yeah.
This is one of my nagging questions. I'm sorry. Like, what happens to Kevin McKidd? We talk about all the people in France die in like the first 10, and McKidd makes it out, right? Another ER doctor, right? And I'm like, oh, cool. He's going to be bro. He'll be, crusade bro. And then we never see him. Does he die in the shipwreck along the way? Is that what we're set to assume? Like, what happens?
I thought he just stayed in Messina, but I could be wrong. And not ER bro, but Rome, right?
Oh, yeah.
The legionary Vorenus. That's where he's locked in for me. Is that
Did you guys see the guy who played Titus Pullo just died too?
Just about to say
No.
that. Ray Stevenson died.
He was so good. And I always thought like he needed 15 more roles like that, and they just didn't.
And I'm so excited to see him in the Ahsoka series coming out because he looks so awesome as like a former Jedi gone bad. I'm a huge Ray Stevenson fan. I don't know what happened. I just saw that he passed.
I mean, there was a character who you could believe could take on 20 people and win.
Yeah. That's a guy who could fight Liam Neeson.
right. He could fight Liam Neeson, whereas Orlando Bloom could not.
Yeah.
No, we should create a series based around who can fight Liam Neeson, and just
we
we know Ray Park from Darth Maul. For those of us who have seen Michael Collins, some Irish nationalist guys could probably kill him. Like this whole
Wolves take him out. Wolves could fight Liam Neeson. Yeah.
Wolves could.
Orcas could take Liam Neeson.
Orcas, yeah.
Orcas are having the moment right now.
They
like
are.
Apparently there's this huge thing with orcas and yachts.
The memes have been beautiful. It has brought me both joy and terror of the water simultaneously.
But speaking of ships, right? Like they ship out from Messina, and then there's a little storm, and the boat just falls over sideways. That is not what happened historically to boats on the Mediterranean. They did not have a little wave and then topple sideways.
100% surprised Orlando Bloom didn't at some point say like, hey guys, have you thought about like sails?
Ballast, man. Have you thought about ballast?
Yeah, if you thought about ballast, like let's have some draft, like let's figure out this whole boat thing.
That boat very clearly did not have any ballast at all.
The other amazing thing is like they're getting ready to take off, and there is clearly a storm on the horizon. Not that Ridley Scott's like very finessed with this film at all, but there is clearly a storm coming, and then they just launch off into it.
Mediterranean sailing is dangerous as fuck, man. And well known to be dangerous. Right. They primarily do coasting, staying along the coast, because everybody forever knows if you sail out in the middle of the Med, you're in real trouble. Like there are 15th and 16th century ship captains' logs. Like talking about how like they're going to have to be away from sight of land for a day or so, and like God help us all, because who knows how that's going to work out.
I mean, even the crossing
Right.
from Bari to Dyrrachium.
Did you see the ship name that he takes from Messina to the Holy Land?
Mm-mm.
It's actually the Edmund Fitzgerald. So that's the problem. So
Ah,
Nice, very nicely done.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, the other thing is what I really want to hammer home is that the problems with this movie is not bad history, although that is a problem, and as historians are, but that it just isn't well written in ways that tell a good story. You don't need the shipwreck. I understand he wants to set up the fight with the guy on the horse so that he can then meet the other guy. I don't even remember his name, but I think there's a wonderful source, Usama ibn Munkid, who has these various encounters with lone French knights. And I feel like it's kind of hearkening to that. And I would love to have more of that, but you just don't need the shipwreck. It is, yet another sort of, he's the only survivor of the shipwreck. And you can have one of those moments in a film, but you can't have 30 of those moments in a film and maintain my willingness to believe in your hero. It doesn't advance the story. Like, have him just arrive on the coast. And
I said earlier that it's a really pretty movie, and it is, but I think sometimes it gets caught up in its own prettiness. And part of, I think, the point of the shipwreck was that you could then have this great scene where he's like staggering along these entirely not accurate sand dunes, right? In like walking through the Sahara. Essentially, it's a really lovely shot. That's not the Levant at all, but it's a lovely shot.
Yeah. Well, but like, why is Safadine just wandering out in the desert? Like, what the fuck is Safadine doing in the middle of the desert, trying to show up to like the single oasis? Where are they?
He's stealing horses, man.
Because this is what Safadine has to do. He has to look for like, oh, the boat wrecked. I guess maybe I'll get my first horse. What the hell?
yeah.
Oh,
the film does at times feel like it's a series of skits versus a cohesive narrative where it's like, let us demonstrate X so we can learn Y about Balian.
yes.
All this will come to pass towards the very end, and that explains his ultimate friendship with Saladin and how they could escape back to France and kind of get back to where they started, right? I mean, and it's kind of this whole circle back, and you've got to create these skits that don't quite connect, but it's like, let me show you little dimensions of what makes Balian so dreamy, I guess.
I feel like the connecting thread through all of this, though, is just that Christianity is bad, which I think is really Ridley Scott's point in this movie. Right. I think the reason these vignettes are all there and make no sense is that none of them have to do with a cohesive plot line. It's all that, like, look at how Christianity is shitty.
And religion more generally.
More generally. But you have like these moments where it's like, oh, look, Muslims are just like doing normal things. And so it's like religion in general is bad, but like look at the violence of Christianity because it's coming out of this very specific American context.
There's also that moment too. I mean, Muslims are given so little screen time. Our Muslim characters are given so little screen time. It's really hard to say anything. But there is that moment where Saladin is walking with his advisors, and I think one of them is supposed to be like Ahmad ad-Din or something like that. One of his biographers, who's portrayed as kind of a cleric of some type, or like an Umar or something like that. But like he says something like, "Go, we need to kill the Christians" or something like that. And Saladin's like, "No, we're going to be tolerant or whatever." So there's little hints of that, but like every bad character is like motivated by religion, which is some sort of cloak for greed, right? Balian's brother, who's the priest at the very beginning, the kind of ridiculous patriarch of Jerusalem throughout, Guy de Lusignan, the head of the Templars, Randall de Chatillon, all those guys, right? Like, it's just, religion is a poor motivating factor why can't we all just kind of get along?
And it's too bad because Reynard de Chatillon was a bastard who killed a lot of people. And like, if he was extraordinary in his terribleness, like he was a villain, right? A real villain, wanted to launch. I mean, that's true. He wanted to launch a war. He did murder civilians. He definitely killed and probably raped Saladin's sister, right? Like all of that is stuff that, and people around him reacted with horror at the things he did. And that only works if like the other people are also really bad, right? Like he's much more interesting if Guy de Lusignan is not just a mustache curly villain, but is a complex character. Then Reynard becomes a bigger deal. Go ahead.
I was just going to say like Brendan Gleeson like eats that role up. Like he is so good in that role. Yeah.
He's really good in that role. Yeah.
If he was the villain, if he was that character, right, and other people were more nuanced, he would be more interesting, I think. Yeah, there's that part where he's dancing while he is saying, "Give me a war," which is just, I mean, it's a fucking great scene.
So what I did like about that is he knows here that he's the villain. Like,
right.
He's aware. He's like, all right, like this is we need war. and we need a bastard, and that's gonna be me. God damn it, let's go. Like, I really enjoyed that about his character. That it was. I don't know that it's like an act necessarily, but like it's his role, and he knows it, and he's buying into it, and I appreciated that.
I think maybe one of the frustrating aspects of this film is that you actually have these incredibly talented actors. I actually am a huge Martin Scorsese fan because I see him and I've seen him in a bunch of stuff. Of course, he plays the mustache twirling villain in this, and he plays it to a T. He's really good at playing it the way it's written. But I think the guy actually is capable of doing, and that he had actually screen tested for Balian's role as well. Which is an interesting.
That would have been a lot better.
Well, you make Balian an older guy, it becomes a different film. I think
Paul Bettany also auditioned for Balian, though, so we could have gone a lot of different directions here.
Wow.
Had you not cast this movie according to Tiger Beat, I feel like you would have gotten a better film overall, right? And there are some like Jeremy Irons is phenomenal in this.
I don't think so, because I think that the writing still lets it down. I mean, Jeremy Irons is phenomenal, but like Tiberius is interesting because like that character is interesting because of things he doesn't do in the movie. Like, I definitely think that there are things that could have made the movie more enjoyable as a piece of cinema. But that fundamentally the story that Ridley Scott wants to tell is flawed when it comes to storytelling, comes to what makes stories work.
Can I ask you guys this? All of you guys study this era. This is certainly not the only film on Crusades, and we seem to see Crusades show up over and over and over. And a lot of the films we've done on HATM to one degree or another have focused either on the Crusades, Knights Templar, all of this stuff, even all the way back to like the founding thing that we started on this thing 5 years ago with Jesus. I almost couldn't say National fucking Treasure of all movies. I couldn't say that one, right?
Yeah.
What's the hold of the Crusades on, say, contemporary American culture? Like, why are we so keen on it? Why can't we let this go? What's going on with this?
We're all looking at each other because we all have, I think, thought about this a lot. And so someone take it.
9/11.
Yeah.
It's 9/11.
Really?
Yeah, it's 9/11.
What is 9/11? How does 9/11 inform? How do we think about the Crusades?
So I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened. I'm the baby.
Christ,
I
I'm
know
so
I'm
fucking
the
old.
baby of the group. I just don't have any hair. It's fine. It's we immediately just become inundated in a relentless stream of anti-Muslim vitriol on every single goddamn media source that we get, which becomes isn't this the real clash of civilizations, which becomes, isn't this just the Crusades that never end? I mean, Bush referencing the fucking Crusades really just kicks it up a notch, and then that becomes the last 20 years.
And I think that's particularly fair as someone who was in graduate school when 9/11 happened. The study of the Crusades was not a particularly productive nor interesting area of Crusade scholarship. I remember having a conversation with one person by the name of Jay Rubenstein shortly before 9/11, telling him I wanted to do something on the Crusades, and him saying like, "Oh, why would you want to do that?"
Jay Rubenstein has since written a number of books on the Crusades and won a MacArthur Award. So,
And was my doctoral advisor, and is the reason I studied Crusades.
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So yeah, but I think it really did reinforce, and I think Thomas is absolutely right, at least in the American consciousness, the fact that you have to pay attention to religion, because religion actually isn't gone, despite political scientists trying to tell us that secularization thesis is an actual thing. It's not a thing. If anybody's curious, but also that religion as a form of study, or as an area of study, is actually really useful when we want to talk about the European Middle Ages, especially English, but also to a degree French historiography up until that point had really been moving away from that towards kind of social history, kind of marginalizing the role of religion. That 9/11 really did kind of change that, especially with the global war on terror and things of that nature as well. Why is it happening now is because in some part it's because 9/11, but because it's reemerged in a variety of different ways. I mean, the far right has appropriated the Crusades imagery, especially since Breivik, the Norwegian mass murder in 2011, and how that's been appropriated by far right groups, across Europe and across, even Russia and the United States as well. They're all writing from the same tune. I mean, the guy who went into the mall in Allen, Texas recently had Deus Vult, God wills it, the rallying cry of the First Crusade, tattooed on his arm, right next to a fucking swastika. So, I mean, like, it makes sense in their minds. And so it's catapulted into popular consciousness in those ways. I don't think that most people who watch things like Kingdom of Heaven or just want to pick up a book on the Crusades, and they're trade books on the Crusades are kind of quite popular still, knows about that connection necessarily. But it seems in some ways like a clear-cut good versus evil thing to them. And, that's kind of a dangerous position to take, in which it seems like the Europeans were the clear good guys and the Muslims were the clear bad guys, that Europe was somehow under threat. It had to fight a defensive war, and it just kind of goes from there.
The first time I taught a class on the Crusades, which then later I would rename to Crusade Jihad, and then later I would stop using that as a framework altogether, was the summer of 2001. And I've always been really happy that I taught it that summer, because I got to experience teaching this class before 9/11. And it definitely changed a lot. I mean, the thing about the Crusades, then a few years later, when Matt and I were both on the job market as historians, is that the Crusades was one of the things from the Middle Ages that Americanists had heard of.
Hey.
It was legible. So it made a big difference in terms of, that conversation, not just getting to an interview, but then on a campus visit around a dinner table, like people knew what you were talking about. At least they thought they did. The first time I met Matt and Thomas, or not Thomas, I'd met Matt before. First time I met Thomas was at a conference that Matt had organized on the Crusades and the American Civil War. So I do think 9/11 locks it into a certain kind of way that we're still very much in, but it definitely is part of this kind of lost cause narrative that in U.S. history serves a function, that it's a pre-lost cause, lost cause. That ideas about chivalry. I think Matt had a grad student who really talked about the ways in which the racist American fraternities both loved the KKK and chivalry, and used a lot of kind of knightly related language. I mean, and this dates back to this 19th century literary tradition as well. The ways that the Crusades get used by European colonial endeavors, as a way of, we need to finish the business of the Crusaders kind of things, that they become this object in storytelling that is useful. It makes the past a useful tool for all kinds of agendas, almost none of which I like. I mean, they all and are really troubling, but that for a couple centuries they've been useful to. In the 20th century in Egypt, the Saladin becomes useful as a tool in the Pan-Arab movement in mid-20th century anti-colonial history. That Saladin in the Crusade history becomes Saladin again people knew about him, but he was not a major sort of folklore figure, as I understand it, in 20th century sort of Arab culture. And he becomes placed there sort of in the context of Nasser's Pan-Arab cultural movement that becomes useful. This is what we do as historians, right? Is we kind of try to identify how these things come and go. And the Crusades have this real power narratively, most of which is not actually borne out by the actual history. And that, which is much more complicated and much less one side against it's never just one side against another. It's always lots and lots of different people with different agendas trying out different things and different understandings of religion and identity. And, there's these texts that are sort of, I don't really care about the Muslims, but let me tell you about these bad Christians in Acre. Those are the ones I'm really mad about. There's a lot going on there in the history that doesn't serve these narrative functions in the same way.
I think the horrific presentation of the Knights Templar is actually an important part of this pop culture reimagining of the Crusades, because the goal of Ridley Scott's portrayal of the Templars is that shouldn't we stop being such religious fanatics and so murderous on our own end? Shouldn't we, be less violently religious? The problem is this is nothing to do with the actual Knights Templar. This is not a great portrayal of them. Like Reynald de Chatillon, absolutely. I mean, Bernard Hamilton's Elephant for Christ is just a badass title of a book about a piece of shit human. But Reynald de Chatillon is that monster. But the Templars become this other thing. The problem is, I think the far right would watch this movie and be like, fuck yeah, this is what we want to be. Right? This ahistoric portrayal of the Templars is what people on the far right want the Templars to be and why they want to mimic them. What if we just wanted to murder all of these people? What if we just wanted to pick up the sword and slaughter our way through the people who are different than us? And not that the Templars are great. These are military orders that exist within their own things. But the idea that these are the assholes who destroy the Kingdom of Jerusalem because they're just so fucking incompetent and so violent isn't really borne out by the sources. I mean, I'm more Team Hospitaller than Team Templar if we have to make this Twilight thing. But these are competing factions who want land grants. Who are trying to
I figured you for Jacob.
I don't know what that reference means. I know that we have teams. One of them's a werewolf. One of them's a vampire. I'm going to go to White Wolf.
You're totally werewolf.
I mean, like, I have played both Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf, whatever the fuck it was, and Lone Wolf in White Wolf back in the day, but I literally don't. That's what I think of.
I tried to watch Twilight once.
I have not. I have never been that mad at myself, and when I get that mad at myself, I'll go back to therapy. That portrayal of the Templar just feeds into all of the shitty conspiracy theory visions of the Templar anyway. Right? All of these people have an idea about how they're trying to protect Jerusalem, and most of them are not just like, what if we murdered all of the people?
Yeah. You know, I think that if your goal is to talk about the Crusades in a way that does not, that fights against religious fanaticism in the 21st century, that is not my goal. But it is also something that maybe it is part of my goal, because I just think the actual history of the Crusades demonstrates that fanaticism is not inevitable, that it is not an inescapable historical force, that people make choices, that those choices are contingent, that think that there is no historical clash of civilizations, but that you don't do that by just writing out the complications or by simplifying the Templars, to create a perfect villain. Like, the actual history does not support narratives of clash of civilizations or religious fanaticism. It just doesn't. The actual history doesn't. And so I feel like if Ridley Scott had written a bad movie that nonetheless saved the world from terrorism, I would be very happy with that movie. But I don't think that the movie does the job that he wants it to do, and it's a bad movie.
John Wyatt?
Yeah. So
that was a very long inhale. It's like you were ready to just sitting here, just like, okay.
No, I mean, David and Matt and Thomas have said a lot of what I would say, actually, and it's a little bit closer to their area of study than mine. But yeah, I think to your earlier question, one of the things that people latch onto the Crusades for is, as David was saying, sort of the framing. It makes parts of the past more legible, right? So you can take this sort of real basic idea of the Crusades as good versus evil and us versus them, and then use that to look back at, say, World War II. It's like, oh, well, that's really easy. That's a crusade against Nazis. Great. So it's portable like that. And I think David rightly pointed to the lost cause narrative as sort of coming from the other side. Like, there's this sort of lost kingdom of Jerusalem of the South, right? So you were asking why. Like, what is it that the Crusades and the Templars have? Why do they have this hold on us? And part of the reason that the Templars have a hold on us is the way that the order gets disbanded in sort of really dramatic fashion. That then gets picked up by what the hell's the book?
Da Vinci Code?
That's the one. Yeah, with the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, people like that who sort of look at the way that the Templar order gets sort of exploded all at once. And say, oh well, like there's room there for interesting conspiracy, and like they vanished and their treasure vanished, and where did it go? Well, obviously it, as you know, Jason, it went to the New World and wound up in National Treasure. But there's room there for a lot of conspiracy because it's sort of a dramatic and traumatic act. So I think there's that too.
I mean, the dissolution of the Templars is a dramatic act, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a really wild historical moment where a lot of people make a lot of choices that go in wild directions. But then you get to tell, then that sparks storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things David has said over the last time since we've been here this hour has been there are other stories, other better stories here, even within this own story to tell. Right. So as we're kind of starting to close out towards this pod, I'm kind of wondering, guys, if you can maybe think about maybe one book and one film or TV series, if you like, that do the Crusades better. Somebody coming to this podcast saying, hey, I want to learn more about the Crusades. What do I read? What's good here? What do you go with? What do you read and what do you watch? The floor is yours.
Jay Rubenstein, Armies of Heaven. If you want a readable book on the Crusades, I love my doctoral advisor, and I love that book.
And if you want a shorter one, Susanna Throop's The Crusades and Epitome. Susanna's a good friend of ours, and it's very it's very short. It's very clearly written. It really hits all of the major points I want you to know, and then kicks you out towards more specified other sources to go. It is the thing that I recommend to people when they say they want something short of the Crusades.
And it's free and online too.
Yeah, right. Free and online. So we should definitely share that. It's really an amazing resource. I'm really happy it exists.
So I would point to Saban ibn Munqif's book. So he said an Arab contemporary during the Crusades, and one of the it's short, it's interesting, and one of the great things about it is it becomes clear as you read it how much he has in common with the Christian knights in Jerusalem, and sort of the real back and forth he has with them. There's a class commonality that becomes really clear reading that book, that cuts past the religion pretty quickly.
Yeah. Paul Cobb has a new translation of it, and it's great.
And his The Race for Paradise is also excellent. I've used that in class, and people really like that one.
All of these are great, but I would sticking with the movies theme of the historical movies thing. There's a quirky little movie which I can't remember how I saw it, but it's called Pilgrimage. It's from like 2017 or something like that. Stars Spider-Man, Tom Holland, and then John Bernthal, who you may know from the Punisher TV show or from The Walking Dead.
I'll watch anything with John Bernthal.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
He's really great. And he plays John Bernthal. I mean, this is a little bit of a spoiler. It's a very mild spoiler, but he's come back to Europe from being a crusader, and he's mute. And he's clearly suffering from the trauma of this experience. And it's about, and Tom Holland's a monk, actually, among other monks, and they're trying to take a relic from their monastery back to Rome at the Pope's request. And this guy and then there's kind of these adventures along the way. But it gets at something that we don't talk a lot about, even as historians, and it's very difficult to find time even in our classes to talk about, is the experience of going and coming back and experiencing something just radically different. If you're from a small village in the Auvergne or something like that, Aubalian, like going to the East would have been like fucking crazy in the 12th century, like just absolutely bonkers. And then to experience like horrific violence, like on the military expedition there, probably on your way there, and then to come back to a normal life like that. Like Jay Rubenstein has written some stuff about this in his more recent book, Nebuchadnezzar's Dream, but like, it's got to be this incredible experience, and that's part of the Crusades too. It's not just something that happens over there; it happens like everywhere across Europe, because these communities and these cultures were integrated more than we oftentimes give them credit for.
When it comes to movies, I like two Crusades movies, neither of which are good history, but I like them because they're really explicit in their 20th century politics, and I think they pair well with Kingdom of Heaven, because Kingdom of Heaven is really explicit in its 21st century plea for multicultural tolerance, right? And so one of them is 63, Solid in the Victorious. It's an Egyptian film and sort of the glory days of Egyptian cinema, which, for those who don't know, had, an incredible history of sort of making this film. So it is Saladin, the pan-Arab icon. He was, of course, a Kurd, which is super complicated if you think about the Kurds in the 20th century, let alone today. But it's really not trying to hide that it's an argument for pan-Arabism, and so I think that's really good. And the other one is Alexander Nevsky, which is the famous film Eisenstein. Is that Eisenstein with the Prokofiev score? The glory days of early Russian cinema, and it's about the Teutonic Knights versus the humble peasant farmers of Novgorod in the Northern Crusades. And it's an anti-Nazi propaganda. It's, the Russian people coming together to defeat these guys who literally have like Nazi eagles on their heads, partially because the Nazis drew from medieval German iconography and their own iconography. But I've had some trouble with students with both of them because you have to work them into being able to watch a black and white film or a 60s film in Arabic with subtitles. That's not a first day kind of exercise. But those are, I really like teaching with those films anyway. And if you haven't seen them,
I'm dying to see your syllabus on this, David.
Well, I quit teaching, so I don't even know where that.
You're a teacher right now, baby.
Anymore, but yeah, but I think there are a lot of people who teach the sort of the Crusades through film. That's a class that shows up all the time. There's also a Cecil B. DeMille sort of great epic, Hollywood epic film, but I actually don't think it's as good. I don't think it's as teachable. I don't think it's as useful in kind of thinking about this thing of the Crusades as this object that gets repurposed again and again and again, which is what I like to talk about.
John Wyatt, what do you got? Anything?
I'm trying to think of anything. I'm drawing kind of a blank, and I have some suspicions about what Thomas might pick, and I don't want to steal from him.
No, go.
Well, the last time we were here, you talked about really enjoying Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which starts with the Third Crusade having fallen apart, I guess, and has some real critiques of it. Beyond that, I'm drawing a bit of a blank, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I by and large do not like Crusade movies, with the exception of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which is only like, hey, that was a clusterfuck. What if we never did that again? And that's about it. That's about all I can say that's good about that. I have book anti-recommendations.
Ooh, yes, absolutely.
If you are just like jumping on Amazon thinking, fuck it, I'm going to search Crusades, I'm going to buy a book. This is the thing I hate
Sure.
most about Amazon, that it's just like, oh, you have titles. We're going to word vomit shit up there. It's like you have, on today's search, you have Riley Smith and Susanna Troops, The Crusades of History, which is great. You have Jean de Joinville, Geoffroy de Villardois, and others, Chronicles of the Crusade from Penguin. That's delightful. Tom Asbridge's history is up there on the first page. And then you get to Steve Weidenkopf's The Glory of the Crusades and Rodney motherfucking Stark's God's Battalions, The Case for the Crusades on the first page for Amazon. And those books are pieces of vile shit that you would not even tear out to use as packing material in a box of possessions that you hate.
Let it out, Thomas. Let it out. Let it out. Don't hold back.
This is still me. I hate that this is still me controlling myself, David. But yeah, no, those those are the case for Christian nationalism. Just like throw it into the past, right? It's a why aren't you picking up a sword to go murder Muslims right now? Why aren't you a real American? And there is a genre of far right Christian nationalist history of the Crusades that's just all about like, what if we really leaned into the Islamophobia with a heavy like, this is what we should do harder. We didn't occupy enough of the Middle East and we didn't burn down enough cities. What if we did Iraq with nukes the next time and then just like plant a cross over the glass sheet? And there is an entire genre of shitty far-right histories of the Crusade that are really easy to find and are really cheap because the production value is low because they're just lying. And it's the hardest part about like studying the Crusades is that like there is another faction of people studying the Crusades for the worst possible reasons.
But it's not just shitty far-right propagandists. I mean, that's true in every, I think about some of the great historian, Bill O'Reilly, who is one of the best-selling historians of the United States in publishing history. That's a problem, right? That's Jason's problem, but it's a problem.
It's everybody's problem.
And we have people, right? It's everyone's problem. We have people like that too. But then there are really very serious historians. And I think in the mid 20th century, the problem was this guy, Sir Stephen Runciman, that I think Matt brought up, that he was a very famous historian, wrote beautiful rhetoric, and I think was wrong about a lot of things. But more recently, there is kind of a far right Catholic with PhD, highly educated historian, one of whom is not my PhD advisor, but was sort of the most important person to me in coming to know my archive, wrote me letters of recommendation, blurbed my book. I mean, we had a real, was a friend, but when he does, this guy, Tom Madden is his name, when he does scholarship, I've always thought it was brilliant and really beautifully researched and just his ability to take an archive and make it visible to the reader. I mean, it's what I wanted to do. But then he also says the Crusades were fair, that they were justified. It was necessary. It was true. And, in his writing for the Wall Street Journal and more broadly. And he's not alone. There's a whole kind of right-wing, mostly Catholic, mostly Anglophone, but not, I'm sure actually that's not true. I'm sure there's a lot of other Europeans doing that kind of work in other languages, who really want the Crusades to be the history that justifies their contemporary political positions in ways that, and they're not just ideologues with cheap books. They are people who can read the Latin and the Greek, but they're still making these arguments. And that to me as an academic is a different kind of problem than the Bill O'Reilly equivalent, and why I don't go to certain conferences anymore, because I just was uncomfortable in those communities.
Let me circle this back to this final question here on this film. Is Kingdom of Heaven a history movie?
Yeah, it tells a story about the past. Yeah.
John Wyatt?
Yeah, I think both, because as Matt said, it tells us a story about the past. There are pieces of it, a number of pieces of it that are historically accurate, which is good. I would suspect that a number of people walking into that movie for the first time never knew that, if they knew about the Kingdom of Jerusalem, never knew that it had a leper for a king. Like, that's a thing.
Yeah.
So like there's quite a lot of actual learnable history in there, which is good. It's also a history movie, as Matt says, because it tells us a story about the past and sets sort of a vernacular historiography, right? Like, it helps us as a culture understand the Crusades in ways that we as historians don't appreciate, but like it's doing vernacular historiographic work. So yeah.
David?
I think any history movie that is trying to locate its story in a particular time and place and kind of historical narrative of the past, and then work it in whatever way they want to, counts for sure as a history movie. So absolutely, it's a pretty broad category, but I think that this is really trying to do a certain kind of work historiographically. As John says, that one I don't appreciate, but it is certainly that.
All right, Thomas, we started with you. We're going to end with you. We're circling back, just like Balian, all the way back to France.
It is absolutely a history movie. Again, not one that I like, but it's very much a history movie. It's also an excellent historical artifact for the time that it was made. And so it really serves two purposes very, very well. It serves the purpose of being a time capsule from 2005 a lot better than it does about telling the story of the 12th century. But yes, it is a history movie.
All right. Gentlemen, where can we find you on social media, Twitter, Blue Sky? I don't know if it's not there anymore. Like, what's going on? Thomas, where you at?
I am at T. Lecaque everywhere. I am the only Thomas Lecaque on the planet. I'm easy to find.
Matthew?
Easiest way to get in touch with me website is profgabriele.com with the E at the end.
David?
I have davidmperry.com, but you can also go to HarperCollins and look for The Bright Ages, and I hope you do.
Oh, well, I've got a copy. And John Wyatt, how about yourself, sir?
All right. So I am the surprised eel historian on Twitter and Blue Sky and all kinds of other places at Greenlee JW on all of them. If you need a map, you can find me on my website, which is Surprised Eel Maps. There's contact information on there.
Got it.
Thanks for indulging us with this crossover episode of American Medieval, in partnership with the podcast Reckoning with Jason Herbert. Go check out Jason's podcast now for more on history, the outdoors, and movies. But until then, thanks again for listening to American Medieval. Be good. See y'all next week.